Chapter 1, The Voice in the Night. The studio was dimly lit, save for the soft glow of the control panel and the faint red light that signaled the microphone was live. Felix leaned back in his chair, one hand adjusting his headset while the other scrolled lazily through the messages pouring into the campus radio station's inbox. His late-night show, Night Talk, had become a staple for students burning the midnight oil, offering a mix of easy banter, song dedications, and the occasional life advice, none of which he claimed to be qualified to give. "All right, night owls, it's that time again." Felix's voice flowed smoothly into the microphone, effortlessly charismatic. "Another late-night session with yours truly, DJ Felix. You send in your thoughts, dilemmas, and existential crises, and I pretend to have all the answers." He chuckled, the sound warm and inviting. "Now, let's see what we've got tonight." His fingers hovered over the screen until a familiar name caught his eye. Midnight Echo. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Midnight Echo was a regular, a mysterious, poetic soul whose messages always carried a depth that starkly contrasted with the usual light-hearted chatter of his other listeners. Over time, their exchanges had turned into a peculiar routine, an anonymous conversation held in the open airwaves. Clearing his throat, Felix clicked the message open and began to read. "If you were to look into the window of destiny and see someone you already knew, what would you do?" Felix blinked. Well, that was new. Most of Midnight Echo's messages were reflective, sometimes bordering on melancholic, but this one had an almost playful edge to it. He chuckled, leaning into the mic. "Ah, Midnight Echo, always coming in with the deep cuts. The window of destiny. Huh? For those who don't know, that's one of our campus's finest legends. If you stand before the right window on the room 459 of the comprehensive building during the spring equinox night, you'll see your destined person." He paused for dramatic effect. "But let's be real. If I saw someone I knew, easy. I'd confess my undying love and dramatically declare that fate had spoken." Felix grinned as he continued. "All right, listeners, weigh in. What would you do? Run away? Pretend you didn't see them? Or, like me, embrace destiny and make it your problem?" As expected, the chat board lit up with responses. "Nah, I'd pretend I saw nothing and move on. Too risky. I'd take a selfie with the window first. Proof is important." "Felix, you say that, but would you really confess?" Felix scoffed, feigning offense. "Excuse you, of course I would. I'm all about facing fate head-on. No regrets." A notification blinked on his screen, another message from Midnight Echo. It was rare for them to send multiple in one night. Curious, Felix clicked it open. "No regrets, huh? Guess we'll see." Felix's fingers stilled above the keyboard. There was something oddly personal about that reply. He shook his head, shaking off the unease. Midnight Echo was probably just playing along with the topic. That's what made them fun. With a shrug, he leaned back into his chair. "Well, that's all for tonight, folks. Don't stare into too many mysterious windows, and if you do, make sure it's at a socially acceptable hour." DJ Felix signing off. Until next time, keep the night alive. As the on-air sign dimmed and the studio fell silent, Felix stretched, rolling his shoulders. Another night, another show. But as he gathered his things, his gaze lingered on the screen where Midnight Echo's last words still glowed softly. "No regrets, huh? Guess we'll see." Felix had no idea just how much those words would come to mean. Chapter 2. A Game of Identities. The rhythmic pounding of basketballs echoed through the gym, blending with the occasional squeak of sneakers against polished floors. Justin dribbled effortlessly, weaving through his teammates before executing a perfect jump shot. The ball swished through the net, drawing a few impressed nods from his fellow players. "Damn, Justin, you're on fire today." Kai clapped him on the back as they jogged toward the benches for a water break. Justin took a swig from his bottle, his gaze flickering toward the far end of the gym, just past the glass doors. There, almost hidden behind a vending machine, was a familiar figure. Felix. He was leaning against the wall, earphones plugged in, pretending to scroll through his phone. But Justin knew better. This wasn't the first time he'd caught the campus DJ lingering near the basketball courts. The first time might have been a coincidence. The second time a fluke. But by now, Justin was convinced Felix had an interest. Whether in the sport or something else entirely, he wasn't sure yet. Kai followed Justin's gaze and smirked. "You noticing what I'm noticing?" Justin wiped his face with his towel, feigning ignorance. "No idea what you're talking about." Kai chuckled. "Right? Sure. The famous campus DJ just happens to be loitering around the gym. Totally normal." Eric, who had been listening, snorted. "Maybe he's scouting talent for a sports segment on his show." Or, Kai mused, leaning in, maybe he's interested in someone on the team. Justin shot him a look, but his heartbeat quickened. If only they knew how close to the truth they were. Later that evening, after showering and changing into casual clothes, Justin found himself near the campus radio station. He had no reason to be there, not really, except that he knew Felix would be inside, prepping for his late-night show. With a deep breath, he knocked on the open door. Felix glanced up from his laptop, his eyes momentarily widening in surprise. "Basketball star Justin. To what do I owe the honor?" Felix's voice was teasing, as always, but Justin didn't miss the hint of curiosity in his tone. Justin leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Just passing by." He let his gaze wander over the equipment, the soundboard, the mic. "Didn't know you spent so much time here." Felix smirked. "Kind of essential for a radio host." "Fair point." Justin shifted his weight. "You ever think about doing something outside the station? Like covering events, sports games?" Felix raised an eyebrow. "You mean like basketball?" Justin shrugged. "You seem to hang around the gym a lot. Figured you might be interested." Felix narrowed his eyes but grinned. "Observant, aren't you? Maybe I just like the energy there." "Maybe." Justin pushed off the doorframe, his heart hammering a little. "If you're curious about the game, I could show you a few things." Felix blinked, clearly surprised by the offer. "You? Teach me basketball?" "Why not?" Justin smirked. "Unless you're afraid of embarrassing yourself." Felix scoffed. "Please, I embarrass myself on air every night. A few missed shots won't kill me." Justin chuckled. "Then it's a deal." He took a step back. "I'll see you at the court tomorrow. Don't be late." Felix rolled his eyes but didn't refuse. "Fine, fine. But if I end up breaking an ankle, you're covering my radio shift." Justin laughed, walking away with a triumphant feeling curling in his chest. Felix had no idea that the basketball player trying to get closer to him was the same Midnight Echo who had been sending him letters all along. And Justin intended to keep it that way. For now. Chapter 3, Anonymous Affection. Felix tapped his fingers against the wooden desk of the radio booth, the dim glow of the console lights casting soft shadows on his face. The station was quiet, save for the smooth hum of the broadcasting equipment. The show had ended for the night, but he lingered, staring at the latest message from Midnight Echo on the screen. Ever wonder what it would be like if an anonymous voice suddenly became a face you knew? Felix read the words over and over, his lips curling into a thoughtful smile. Midnight Echo had a way of saying things that stuck with him long after the show was over. He found himself thinking about their exchanges more often these days, even when he wasn't on air. It was ridiculous, really. How could he feel this connected to someone he'd never met? Yet, at the same time, something in their words felt familiar, as if Midnight Echo was someone he should know. Shaking his head, Felix stretched and pushed himself away from the console. He needed air. At the campus basketball gym, the sounds of sneakers screeching against the polished floor and the rhythmic bounce of the ball filled the space. Justin wiped sweat from his forehead as he took a break, walking toward the benches where his phone rested. He unlocked it, navigating instinctively to the live stream of Felix's latest show. His heart raced slightly as he replayed the moment he had been waiting for. If Midnight Echo really existed in my real life, who would he be? Felix had mused on air, his tone carrying a hint of curiosity. Justin swallowed, his grip tightening on his phone. Did Felix suspect? Or was he just playing into the mystery of it all? "You good?" Eric's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. His teammate was standing next to him, towel draped around his neck, brows raised. Yeah, Justin said quickly, locking his phone. Just thinking about something. Eric smirked. Thinking? You? Must be serious. Shut up. Justin rolled his eyes, but the teasing did little to distract him from the flutter in his chest. Was it possible Felix was thinking about him without realizing it? The next day, Felix found himself at the outdoor courts again, leaning against the railing as he watched the basketball team practice. He told himself he was just passing by, but he knew better. Ever since Justin had started approaching him more often, Felix had begun seeing him in a different light. The guy wasn't just a jock. He was surprisingly insightful, unexpectedly funny, and, if Felix was being completely honest with himself, more interesting than he had anticipated. Enjoying the view? Felix nearly jumped out of his skin as Justin's voice came from right beside him. He turned, only to find the basketball player smirking at him. You always sneak up on people like that? Felix scoffed, trying to regain his composure. Justin shrugged, taking a sip from his water bottle. You always watch basketball practice like it's a soap opera? Felix rolled his eyes, but he couldn't fight the grin tugging at his lips. Maybe I just like the drama. Well, if you're interested in more than just watching, we could always use another player. Felix snorted. I think I'll pass. I like my bones unbroken, thanks. Justin chuckled, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence was oddly comfortable. Felix found himself studying Justin's profile. How he looked effortlessly cool even when drenched in sweat. How his presence was naturally easygoing yet grounding. And that was dangerous, because lately, Felix had been catching himself thinking about two people, Justin and Midnight Echo. It was ridiculous. One was an anonymous voice, and the other was standing right in front of him. Hey! Justin nudged him slightly. You ever think about doing an outdoor segment for your show? Felix blinked, thrown off by the sudden change in topic. An outdoor segment? Yeah, Justin said, glancing at him. Like, instead of always being in the studio, maybe do a live broadcast somewhere on campus. Interact with people in real time. Could be fun. Felix tapped his chin. That's actually not a bad idea. Justin smirked. See? I have good ideas sometimes. Felix snorted. Sometimes being the key word. Justin just grinned, but his heart was still racing from an entirely different thought, because Felix had unknowingly just taken his bait. If he agreed to an outdoor broadcast, it would give Justin a chance to blur the lines even further between Midnight Echo and himself. And maybe, just maybe, Felix would start to realize they weren't as different as he thought. That night, Felix sat in the dim radio booth once again, reading through the latest messages from listeners. His fingers hesitated over his keyboard before he typed out a question in response to Midnight Echo's latest message. Have you ever wanted to step out from the shadows? To stop being a voice and start being someone real? He hit send, and on the other end of campus, Justin read the words on his screen, his pulse hammering in his ears. Yes, he thought, more than anything. Chapter 4. The clues unravel. The night air was crisp as Felix wrapped up his radio show. He leaned back in his chair, stretching, while the faint chatter of students still awake at this hour drifted in through the slightly open window. The show had ended on a curious note tonight. Midnight Echo had once again sent a message, this time more cryptic than usual. Felix found himself replaying the words in his head as he packed up his things. Sometimes, the answers we seek are hidden in plain sight. Do you ever wonder if you've already met the person who understands you best? Felix had brushed it off on air, laughing it away as another poetic mystery from his most intriguing anonymous listener. But now, alone in the studio, he frowned slightly. Was there something familiar about the way Midnight Echo phrased things? As he exited the building, he was met with a familiar sight. Justin, casually leaning against a lamppost, spinning a basketball on his finger. You're here again? Felix raised an eyebrow, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Justin grinned. What can I say? The campus is quiet at night, and I like walking around. Felix chuckled. Right? And it has nothing to do with my show ending at the same time. Justin shrugged, clearly unbothered. Maybe I just enjoy good company. They fell into an easy stride, walking side by side toward their dorms. Felix had gotten used to these post-show encounters. Justin always seemed to have an excuse to be around, whether it was a late-night training session or just happening to pass by. Tonight, however, Justin's choice of words made Felix pause. You ever think about how people sometimes say exactly what they mean, but no one realizes it? Justin mused, dribbling the ball lightly against the pavement. Felix glanced at him. Like, in what way? Justin smirked. Like when someone's dropping hints, but the person they're talking to is too dense to pick up on them. Felix scoffed. Sounds frustrating. Yeah, Justin said, shooting him a sideways look. It really is. Before Felix could dwell on that, they were interrupted by familiar voices up ahead. Brian, Kai, Sam, and Eric were sitting on a low wall near the dorms, finishing up some late-night snacks. They perked up as Felix and Justin approached. Look who it is, Brian teased. The night owl and the insomniac. Felix rolled his eyes. You guys act like you don't sit here every night. Kai smirked, nudging Brian. True, but it's interesting how someone has been showing up more often lately. Justin tossed his ball at Kai without warning, making him yelp and fumble with it. You talk too much, Justin said, though he was clearly amused. Sam and Eric exchanged knowing glances before Sam leaned toward Felix. You ever get the feeling like some things are staring you right in the face? Felix blinked at him. What's that supposed to mean? Eric chuckled, nudging Sam. Nothing. Just, sometimes people miss what's right in front of them. Felix narrowed his eyes. You guys are being cryptic, and I don't like it. Brian laughed. Relax, we're just messing with you. Mostly. Felix shook his head, but as they said their goodnights and parted ways, a strange feeling lingered. It wasn't just what Sam and Eric had said. It was Justin's words earlier. The way he seemed to watch Felix, like he was waiting for something. Felix had always been good at reading between the lines, but for the first time, he wondered if he'd been deliberately ignoring something right in front of him. And for some reason, that thought made his heart race. Chapter 5: The Window of Destiny. The radio booth was filled with the soft hum of equipment, the warm glow of indicator lights reflecting off Felix's focused expression. He tapped his fingers lightly against the table, listening as the latest song on his playlist faded into the background. It was time for the highlight of the night listener submissions. All right, night owls, Felix said smoothly into the mic, his signature playful tone in full effect. Tonight's topic is a fun one. Have any of you ever tried that ridiculous campus urban legend, the Window of Destiny? He chuckled. So tell me, dear listeners, have any of you given it a shot? And if so, what did you see? The station's inbox lit up almost instantly. Felix scrolled through the incoming messages, eyes darting over the variety of responses. Listener. Stargazer. Tried it last year with my roommate. We saw our own reflections, which means we're fated to be stuck with each other forever. Send help. Listener. Curious Cat. My best friend swears she saw a guy she had never met before, then ended up dating him 6 months later. Kinda creepy, not gonna lie. Listener. Midnight Echo. What if seeing someone in the window doesn't mean destiny, but just reveals what's already in your heart? Felix blinked at the familiar pseudonym. Midnight Echo. As always, the message was cryptic, thoughtful, and just vague enough to get under his skin. He smirked, shaking his head. Midnight Echo, back at it again with the philosophy. I swear, you must have been a poet in a past life. He was about to move on when another message popped up, this time from a name he didn't expect. Listener. Justin K. I tried it once. Saw someone familiar. Felix's breath hitched slightly. He reread the message, his fingers hesitating over the keyboard. Justin K? As in Justin Kingston, basketball star and recently acquired radio show sidekick? He felt a strange, twisting sensation in his chest. Justin had never sent messages before, at least not under his real name. But this response was eerily similar to a question someone else had asked him not too long ago. If you see someone you know in the window of destiny, what would you do? Felix frowned. That had been a question sent by Midnight Echo a few weeks ago. The timing, the wording, the subtle familiarity, it was too much of a coincidence. His fingers curled around the edges of his notes as he tried to focus on the show. He couldn't let himself get distracted. Not now. He cleared his throat and forced a casual laugh. Well, looks like we've got an actual brave soul among us. Justin K. Huh? Saw someone familiar. He drummed his fingers on the table. Now that's interesting. But the real question is, did seeing them change anything? There was no answer, of course. Only silence from the other side of the airwaves. Felix moved on with the rest of the messages, keeping his tone light and engaging, but his thoughts remained tangled. Midnight Echo's message. Justin's submission. The eerily similar wording. Was it possible? Felix shook his head. No, he was reading too much into it. It was just a weird coincidence. And yet, as the show wrapped up for the night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. Chapter 6. Almost found out. Felix had been feeling unsettled ever since that night on the radio, when Justin had nonchalantly admitted to trying the window of destiny. The way he had phrased it, seeing someone familiar, had echoed too closely with Midnight Echo's past messages. It gnawed at Felix's mind, and though he tried to push the thought away, he couldn't shake the creeping suspicion that had begun to take root. So he decided to test the waters. The next afternoon, Felix made his way to the outdoor courts, where the basketball team was finishing up their practice. He leaned casually against the fence, watching as Justin dribbled past two defenders and landed a perfect layup. The way Justin moved, effortless, confident, yet always aware of his surroundings, reminded Felix eerily of the way Midnight Echo crafted his words. Always thoughtful, always purposeful. Justin jogged over to grab his water bottle, his gaze flickering toward Felix with an amused smirk. Didn't peg you for a basketball enthusiast. Felix shrugged, playing it cool. Didn't peg you for a radio enthusiast either. Justin's grip on the water bottle tightened ever so slightly, but his expression remained casual. Hey, your show's entertaining. Aha! Felix narrowed his eyes. So, about that window of destiny thing. You never told me who you saw. Justin took a swig of water, as if buying himself time. Does it matter? Felix hummed, tilting his head. I don't know. Midnight Echo seemed to think it was a pretty important question. For the briefest second, Justin froze. It was imperceptible. Just the tiniest hitch in his breath. The way his eyes flickered to Felix before he quickly masked it with a chuckle. Yeah, he said, voice deliberately light. Guess it's a fun mystery to think about. Felix didn't push further. If Justin was Midnight Echo, he was being careful. But the fact that Justin hadn't outright denied the connection was telling in itself. That night on the show, Felix found himself in a pensive mood. He ran his fingers along the edge of the mic as he read through the night's submissions. Love confessions, humorous takes on campus rumors, a few deep reflections. Then one message caught his attention. If you find yourself having feelings for two different people, what should you do? Felix stared at the words. He had seen plenty of love-related dilemmas cross his inbox, but this one felt different. Maybe because it was too personal, too close to the very thing weighing on his mind. Without thinking, he read it aloud. All right, night talkers, we've got an interesting one here. He cleared his throat and forced a chuckle. The age-old dilemma. What happens when you start catching feelings for two people? Well, first off, I think the real question is, are they really two different people? His words echoed through the station, through the radio waves, and into the ears of one very stunned listener. Justin sat frozen in his dorm, headphones clamped over his ears. His heart pounded as he listened to Felix's voice, laced with an unfamiliar vulnerability. If they make you feel differently, Felix continued, if one of them speaks to your heart while the other makes you feel alive, then what do? Maybe it's not about choosing between two people, but understanding what it is you're actually looking for. Justin clenched his jaw. Felix wasn't just reading a random listener's question. This was Felix's own inner turmoil. and he was talking about Midnight Echo and Justin. Felix sighed into the mic. Well, night talkers, what do you think? Ever been in this situation before? The phone lines lit up. Justin, however, barely registered the responses flooding in. His mind was racing. Felix was starting to piece things together, and Justin wasn't sure if he was ready for that. The next day, Felix bumped into Sam and Eric at the campus cafe. The two were deep in conversation when Felix slid into the seat across from them. "Morning," he greeted. Sam raised a brow. "You look like you didn't sleep." Felix groaned. "Yeah, well, existential crises will do that to you." Eric smirked. "Ah, the two people, one heart dilemma?" Felix shot him a look. "You heard the show." Everyone heard the show. Sam took a sip of his coffee. "So, are you really into two different people?" Felix opened his mouth, then shut it. He wasn't sure how to answer that. "I don't know. Midnight Echo. There's something about the way he thinks, the way he understands me. But then there's Justin, and he surprises me. He's different from what I expected." Eric exchanged a knowing glance with Sam before leaning forward. "Maybe the answer's not as complicated as you think." Felix scoffed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Sam chuckled, standing up. "Just keep your eyes open, Felix. Sometimes the truth is staring right at you." Felix watched them leave, their words bouncing around his head. He already had his suspicions. Now he just needed confirmation. Chapter 7. The Truth Revealed. Felix had been restless all day. Ever since Justin's vague responses and the lingering suspicions in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The thought gnawed at him relentlessly. Justin and Midnight Echo, could they really be the same person? That evening, Felix found himself wandering near the basketball gym, his thoughts too chaotic to focus on anything else. As he passed by the team's lounge, he noticed the door was slightly open, the soft glow of a laptop screen spilling into the dim hallway. Curiosity made him pause. Inside, Justin sat alone, staring at the screen with an intensity Felix rarely saw outside of a game. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he exhaled sharply and leaned back, raking a hand through his hair. Felix wasn't going to intrude, he was just about to step away, when his eyes caught something on the screen. Midnight Echo's unpublished message draft. "Felix, if I had told you the truth from the start, would things have turned out differently? I didn't mean to deceive you. I just wanted to be someone you could truly talk to, without the weight of expectations." A chill ran down Felix's spine. His breath caught in his throat. "Justin." His voice came out sharper than he intended. Justin's head snapped up, his expression shifting from shock to guilt in an instant. "Felix, Felix took a step closer, his heart hammering in his chest. "It's you." His gaze flicked back to the screen. "Your Midnight Echo." Justin shut his laptop instinctively, but the damage was done. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling heavily. "Felix, I can explain." Felix let out a bitter laugh. "Explain what? That you've been toying with me this whole time? Watching me struggle between you and Midnight Echo like some kind of joke?" Justin flinched. "It was never a joke. I didn't plan for it to go this far, I didn't know how to approach you as myself." Felix's fists clenched at his sides. "So you lied? You created this anonymous persona to what? Test me? See how long it would take before I figured it out?" "No, that's not it at all." Justin's voice was desperate now. "I didn't know if you'd ever look at me the same way if I was just Justin from the basketball team. Midnight Echo gave me a chance to talk to you without any expectations." Felix's stomach twisted. He wanted to yell, to tell Justin how humiliating this felt, how betrayed he felt. Instead, he turned on his heel, heading for the door. "Felix, wait!" But Felix didn't stop. The moment he stepped outside, the night air hit him like a shock of cold reality. He kept walking, needing distance, needing space to process the truth that had just shattered everything he thought he knew. Chapter 8. A Live Confession. Felix sat in the dimly lit radio booth, fingers absent-mindedly drumming against the desk. His usual energy was missing tonight, and it showed. The usual playful banter, the effortless charm gone. He read out song requests and messages with a monotone voice, barely processing the words in front of him. He knew the listeners could tell. The chat room was already filling up with concerned messages. Felix, rough day? Dude, where's the usual sass? Even the static on my radio sounds livelier than you tonight. Felix sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. He didn't want to be here right now, but he also didn't want to be alone with his thoughts. The betrayal still stung. The realization that Midnight Echo, someone he had confided in, someone he had unknowingly grown attached to, was Justin of all people, made his stomach twist. He didn't know whether he was more upset at the deception or at himself for not realizing it sooner. He clicked on the next anonymous message, ready to read it out mechanically. But as soon as the words appeared on the screen, his breath hitched. If I always thought I needed to be someone else to get close to you, but then realized you liked me just as I am, would you forgive me? Felix's hands froze on the keyboard. The chat room went silent for a few seconds before messages flooded in. Ooh, is this a confession? Whoever wrote this, bold move. Damn, I want to know the story behind this. Felix stared at the words, his heart pounding in his chest. He swallowed hard. Could it be? A bitter chuckle escaped his lips. This idiot, he muttered under his breath. Then he leaned closer to the mic, exhaling slowly. The entire station felt like it was holding its breath. And then he spoke, voice softer than usual but steady. Well then, Felix said, a faint smile playing on his lips. If that's the case, what are you waiting for? Get to the radio station entrance. Idiot. The moment he finished speaking, the chat exploded. Holy shit, did he just... Wait, is this happening live? Run, mystery confessor. Run. Felix let out a small laugh, shaking his head. His heartbeat was still racing, but this time it wasn't from anger. It was something else entirely. Somewhere out there he knew Justin had heard him. And if he knew Justin at all, Felix barely had time to grab his things before his phone buzzed with a simple message. On my way. Chapter 9, More Than Words. Justin barely remembered running to the radio station. One moment, he had been frozen in place. His breath caught in his throat as Felix's voice rang out through the speakers, calling him a fool and telling him to come get him. The next, his feet had already carried him out of the dorms, through the quiet campus streets, and straight to the radio station entrance. He barely had time to catch his breath before the door swung open. Felix stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a half-smile tugging at his lips. His eyes, however, were unreadable. Somewhere between amusement and something deeper, something that made Justin's heart pound even harder. You really ran here? Felix teased, raising an eyebrow. What if I was joking? Justin exhaled, trying to steady himself. Were you? Felix studied him for a moment before shaking his head with a quiet chuckle. No, he took a step closer, eyes locking onto Justin's. You're such an idiot, you know that? Justin swallowed, a nervous chuckle escaping him. Yeah, I've been told. Felix tilted his head, his expression softening just a fraction. Why didn't you just tell me? Justin hesitated. He had rehearsed this answer in his head a million times before, but standing here, face to face with Felix, everything felt so much bigger, so much more terrifying. Because I was afraid, he admitted, voice low. Afraid that if I told you, you'd stop talking to me, that you'd be disappointed, that Midnight Echo was the only part of me you actually liked. Felix let out a quiet sigh, shaking his head. Then, to Justin's complete surprise, he reached up and hooked an arm around his neck, pulling him in slightly. Their foreheads almost touched. You really don't get it, do you? Felix murmured. Justin's breath hitched. Get what? Felix's grin widened. That you're a complete dumbass. Hey, and that I like you. Justin's brain short-circuited. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but nothing coherent came out. Felix simply watched him, his eyes filled with laughter and something else. Something warm, something real. Felix's grip tightened just slightly. Now, I think you owe me something. Justin's voice came out rough. What? Felix's smile turned mischievous. You made a confession on air. Now it's time to follow through, don't you think? Justin stared at him for a long second, heartbeat hammering in his chest. Then, as if gravity had pulled him forward, he leaned in and finally, closed the space between them. Felix's breath hitched just before their lips met, warm and soft and slightly hesitant at first. Then, as if confirming everything they had been dancing around for weeks, Felix melted into it, his fingers tangling in Justin's hoodie, pulling him in closer. The night was still around them, the campus quiet save for the distant hum of streetlights and the occasional rustling of leaves. But none of it mattered, because right now, in this moment, it was just them. And for once, words weren't necessary. Epilogue: The Window's Answer. It was a quiet evening on campus, the kind where the world felt just a little bit slower, softer. Felix and Justin sat on a bench near the radio station, the glow of the streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. Felix nudged Justin with his elbow. So, tell me the truth, he said, voice teasing yet expectant. When exactly did you try the window of destiny? Justin smirked, leaning back against the bench. Why do you want to know? Felix narrowed his eyes. Because it suddenly hit me. You sent that message saying you saw someone familiar. And if I remember correctly, that whole night was chaos because of my show. So, don't tell me you actually went and did it right after I joked about it on air. Justin let out a low chuckle, tilting his head as if considering his answer. You really want to know? Felix huffed. Of course I do. He paused, then eyed Justin suspiciously. Wait, don't tell me it was just a coincidence? Justin turned to him, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his lips. Instead of answering, he reached out and intertwined their fingers, giving Felix's hand a gentle squeeze. Felix groaned dramatically. Your worst. Justin laughed, tugging Felix closer until their shoulders touched. Some things are better left a mystery. Before Felix could protest further, the sound of the radio station's speakers crackled to life in the background. His own pre-recorded voice echoed through the airwaves. Welcome to a special segment with your favorite DJ, Felix. Tonight we're talking about fate. Does it exist? Do we make our own destiny? Or is there something guiding us towards certain people, certain moments? Felix snorted. I can't believe they're replaying this. Justin shrugged. It's a good episode. On air, Felix's voice continued. Some say the window of destiny is real. Some say it's just a story. But maybe, in the end, the most important answer isn't what the window shows us, but what's in our own hearts. Felix exhaled, turning to Justin. I still think you owe me a proper answer. Justin simply leaned in, pressing a light kiss to Felix's forehead before murmuring, I already gave you one. And for once, Felix had nothing to say, just the quiet realization that maybe, just maybe, fate had already given them exactly what they needed.